Thank you so much, Steve. And let's give a big hand to Steve and all the sponsors for this great conference. It's really an honor to be here. All right, so yes, I'm basically here to give good news. The basic understanding that I'd like to share is that all of us as human beings have been given a wonderful gift. We've been given the gift of a physical body that does not require any animals to suffer to get all the nutrients that we need to be healthy and to thrive and to celebrate our lives on this beautiful planet. So that's the good news. The difficulty is that we've all been born into a culture where from the time we're little infants, we've been compelled to sit down and participate in meals where we're eating the flesh and secretions of terribly abused animals. And this wounds us at a very deep level. So I'm talking basically about the wounding that has happened to us as human beings growing up in a culture that's organized at its core around herding animals and how we can heal ourselves and our society. And one of the main points I want to be making here today is how everything we've been talking about, I've been here now for I got here yesterday evening, about GMOs, about the war machine, all these different things, how it has its roots. All of these things have their roots in animal agriculture. It's very important for us to make these connections because if we don't, we'll be never getting to the root of the problems that we're having. If we don't get to the root of them, it's like Henry David Thoreau said, there's thousands hacking at the branches of evil for every one who's striking at the root. How many of you, just so I have a feeling, have read The World Peace Diet? Anybody? Yeah, a few of you. I see a few hands waving. That's good. All right. So I'd like to talk a little bit about health. And the basic idea, as we can see here, we have physical health, which is what most of us are thinking about, the health of our physical bodies. And that's what when we talk about the real truth about health, we're talking about the health of our physical bodies, but I don't want to just stop there. I want to include also environmental health, and I don't want to stop there. I want to also include cultural health, because these are the three outer dimensions of health that are all interconnected. We cannot have a healthy physical body if the food is genetically engineered and polluted and there's toxic water and air and soil and so forth. We all are aware of that. It's also important for us to live in a society that is healthy, that basically has justice and freedom and so forth. So it's very important to understand how these are interconnected. When we eat food that is toxic, we take drugs to treat the diseases that we get like diabetes and so forth, and then we urinate those drugs back into the ecosystem. They come back into us again. So there's all these feedbacks that are connected in countless ways between these three outer dimensions of health. But in order to be healthy, we also have to have psychological health and spiritual or ethical health. And the thing to really understand, the key is that these are all interconnected. Every one is interconnected with every other one. So I think it's really important for us to get beyond the rather short-sighted view that we only care about our own physical health, the health of our physical body. The thing to understand, what I've discovered over the last 40, I've been a vegan for 40 years, actually, and it's really great to be able to say that because I was always 38 or 39, so now it's 40, 40 years. I went vegan in 1980, and I always say the smartest thing I ever did besides marrying my wonderful wife, Madeleine, was going vegan, because it really creates a foundation for health on all five of these levels. For all of us, each one of us, it really is a radiating center of influence. Each one of us is a conscious, aware individual, a being who can make our own choices. And if we're not awake, if we've been harmed and wounded, and we've had our basic wisdom shut down by eating animal foods since we were born, it's very difficult to make the connections that will allow us to create a political system, an economic system, religious educational systems that are healthy. Otherwise, we're essentially creating systems that enslave us because the underlying behavior of our society, the core fundamental behavior of our society, is imprisoning and killing billions of animals, literally, every day, if we include marine animals. So this is a massive system of destruction of life. And it harms all of us at a very deep level, much more than we're aware. So the basic idea is that animal agriculture destroys and harms and erodes all five dimensions of health. And it's very important to get this really clearly understood. It's kind of like the Trojan horse. I used to teach college courses in the ancient texts, and the battle that they had, the Trojans with the Greeks, they brought this horse in that had was only going to do one thing, which was to destroy them. But they didn't realize that. They thought it was something good. And it's the same thing with animal agriculture. We're raised in a society, I know I was, from the time I was a little kid, that meat, dairy products, and eggs give us protein, give us calcium. We need to eat them to be healthy. And so one of the most important things in this whole thing to understand is that everyone, when we leave this conference and we go out into the world and we see people, everyone who is eating animal foods only does it for one reason. Do you know what that reason is? The one reason people eat animal foods? Anyone have any idea? Taste good. Habit, right. Go deeper. The only reason people eat animal foods, the basic fundamental reason anyone eats animal foods is this. We eat animal foods because we're following orders. That's the reason. The only reason anyone eats animal foods is because they're following orders that are injected into us from the time we're little infants by very well-meaning, loving people. Like in my own case, I remember I was born and raised in Concord, Massachusetts back in the 1950s, and I was raised in a family. We ate lots of meat, dairy products, and eggs. My mother wanted to make sure we grew up to be strong and healthy, so that's what we ate. And I remember getting a lot of the usual problems that kids have: runny noses, sore throats, earaches. I had an appendicitis. I understand now these things are all directly caused by primarily dairy and meat. But the underlying thing to realize is that I was eating those foods because I was born into it. If we go to any grocery store, just go to the baby food section and look at the little jars of food, you'll see you'll see meat, and you'll see beef and cheese and chicken and all these foods. So as little kids, we're eating these foods, and we don't know what we're eating. I didn't know what I was eating when my mother said we're having bacon. I was the first one there at the table because my mother said we're having bacon. I knew I loved bacon because it was all that fat, all that salt, yum, yum, yum. It was really good. But if I had known what it was, if my mother had told me, like in the Taoist tradition, we're taught to call things by their true names. But we don't do that. We don't call things by their true names. We just call them by other names. And so we're eating bacon. I was eating it, and if she had told me that I was eating the flesh of an animal who had been confined her entire life in a small cage, banging her head against the bars, and then was dragged out and was screaming as they cut her throat and so forth, I would have thought, no, I don't even want to hear about that. You want me to eat that? Can I have some oatmeal and a banana? Maybe something else? But see, we don't know what it is. So I remember when I was about 7 years old, I asked my mother, what we're eating, is this what everybody eats? And my mother said, yeah, this is pretty much what everybody eats. And then she left, and then she came back and said, I'm sorry, that's not totally true. There are vegetarians. And I had never heard that word in my life, and I was at the age when I liked learning new words, especially if they were kind of long and kind of interesting, like vegetarian. So I was excited. I said, what's a vegetarian? And she thought for a minute, and then she said, I wouldn't worry about it. You're never going to meet one. and then she said, I don't know where they get their protein. So in my young mind, I thought, wow, these vegetarians are extremely rare. My mother, who's so old, she never even met one. And not only that, they don't get enough protein. So I had this image of these poor people, these unfortunate people who were dragging themselves through the dirt, begging for protein, who had no energy and were weak, and so forth. And so I was just so glad I wasn't a vegetarian. And my mother was totally right. I never heard the word again. That was the end of it. And I remember going away to a summer camp in Vermont when I was in my early teens, 13, 14 years old in that time for a few years. And it was one of those beautiful little farms where nothing bad ever happens, right? A little nestled in the Green Mountains of Vermont, a few animals, a few chickens and other animals. But I remember learning how to catch my own chicken, how to hold her down on this board with 2 nails in it. I had my axe that I had made myself, and I cut her head off, and we put them through the scalding tank. So I learned as a 13-year-old kid how to kill chickens and so forth. And I didn't really have any problem with it because at that point I had gone through the most intense indoctrination a human being can possibly go through. 13 years, every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I was eating not just the food, right, meat, dairy products, and eggs with every meal, basically, but I was eating the narrative. I was eating the story of why we have to do this. There's a whole story that we have about that rationalizes it and makes it okay and propels us into this behavior. So it's very important to understand this. Anthropologists understand this. This is one of the basic things. They understand that every culture, every society transmits its values from generation to generation. And how do they do it? They do it through rituals. Every culture has rituals. The primary ritual in every society is meals. So when we're sitting down and eating food, we're not just eating food. We're eating a whole constellation of narratives and stories and attitudes that justify and explain our relationship with each other, with our society, with animals, with nature, with the divine, and so forth. And so the narrative of animal agriculture, think about it. What is it? It's a narrative of domination, exploitation, and oppression of other beings. It's a narrative of seeing other beings as instruments to be used. And we're not just taught about this, we're eating it. It becomes the very cells of our body. So how can we ever think, how can we ever presume to create a culture of peace and justice and freedom and liberation and sustainability when the fundamental ritual in our society that we're all partaking of and eating is the exact opposite of all of those things? The earth is amazingly abundant. It's like Gandhi said, there's enough for everyone's need. There'll never be enough for everyone's greed. And the problem is animal agriculture is fundamentally the epitome of greed. It's the epitome of wastefulness, of destructiveness, of unnecessary violence towards other beings. And when we engage in animal agriculture and we're cutting down rainforests, I used to yell really for years about how we're cutting down an acre of rainforest every second to grow genetically engineered soybeans to feed, again, prison cows, pigs, chickens, and fishes. And that's mostly going to the wealthy. The more industrialized nations that can afford that. But it's devastating to see that this 1 acre per second is now up to, under the current administration in Brazil, it's up to about 4 acres per second are being cut and burned. When we cut down rainforests, we're not just cutting down some trees, we're destroying ancient wisdom. We're destroying whole webs of life that include not just trees, but countless beings, insects and birds and other animals and plants, and destroying the fundamental genetic wisdom and information on our planet for burgers, for animal foods. And it's completely unnecessary. We can feed everyone on this planet on a fraction of the land if we would eat animal-based foods. Most of the GMO grains that are grown are feedstock for animals, right? Corn, soy, canola, and cottonseed. These are all primarily animal feed. And alfalfa, these are primarily animal feed. So anyone who's eating animal foods is eating most of the GMOs. 90% of the GMOs are for animal feed. We have to really understand that clearly. But this whole violence towards animals and towards hungry people is part of animal agriculture. So that was one thing they mentioned. The other thing the guy said was, he said, do you know what the animals go through? And I remember saying, don't tell me, I don't want to hear about it. But he just told me a few things, which I think we should all be aware of, that these animals who are being killed and eaten, whether it's a small backyard operation or a large commercial operation, it's the same thing. It's hideous violence, it's mutilation of these animals, confinement of these animals, ownership of another being in itself is violence. To say, I own you. That is, only slaves would do that. Only slaves would own another being. Free people would never do that. And we have to really understand very clearly what this is. Anyone who's eating animal foods is being exploited. If we exploit animals, we're being exploited. It's not in our best interest to do it. We're in the prison if we're eating animal foods. Whether they're organic or not, it doesn't really matter. Because organic animal foods are still enormously violent. And this is something that most people don't realize. I didn't realize it myself, but since traveling around all over the world, I've been able to go to animal sanctuaries in all over North America, Canada, and Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, and Africa, so many different places. And the people that have sanctuaries for farmed animals, these are cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys, other animals that have somehow escaped the system of animal agriculture, they say the same thing over and over again. They say animals that come to their sanctuaries come from both little backyard operations and come from big commercial factory farms. And they say the same thing. They say the animals that come from little backyard operations are very often as severely abused or more severely abused than the animals that come from factory farms. So don't ever think, we should never think that somehow there was some good old days when they had small farms where animals were treated well. They've always been abused and impregnated against their will, and their babies have been stolen, they've been killed, and there's no way to do that without abuse and violence, and it's unnecessary. I mean, especially today, it's completely unnecessary. We can feed everyone. As I say, veganic agriculture is now understood, organic and also totally plant-based agriculture without using any bone meal or blood meal or manure. We don't need animal inputs. We can use crop rotation, we can use cover crops, we can use compost and so forth. And this plant-based agriculture is actually as efficient or even more efficient than using animals. Because as soon as we use animals, it's inefficient. We're putting it through the animals, and we don't have to do that. So the good news is there's nothing stopping us from creating a world of peace and freedom and justice and equality except for the outer practice of animal agriculture, which, according to what I'm saying here, this is devastating our health on all levels: environmental health, our cultural health, our physical health, our psychological health, and our spiritual health. But we look at the outer levels. It's very important to understand. I've gone into it a little bit. I'm going to say just a couple more things about the outer level. The environmental health, we've heard quite a bit about it, but just to realize how inefficient it is. According, for example, to the National Academy of Sciences, which did a review of the literature, essentially, on an amount of land, you can feed 12 people a plant-based meal, food, or one person eating the standard Western diet. So it's about 12 to 1. I mean, think of that. That's not just 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. It's about 12 to 1 in terms of land use and how many calories you can get out of the land. For the terms of water, it's even more. According to the United Nations, it's 30 to 1. But even, this is amazing. And petroleum, it's about 12 to 1. Pollution, it's about 12 to 1. So when we move to a plant-based way of eating, we are radically reducing our environmental footprint. It's really important to understand that very clearly, that according to biologists, someone who moves to a plant-based diet is saving at least between 100 and 150 trees every year, where the oceans are being completely strip-mined of fish because we're not just feeding fish to people directly. Scientists have discovered that if you feed fish to cows and pigs and chickens, they give more milk and they fatten up. So this massive destruction of the oceans, the complete overfishing of the oceans, where oceanographers are telling us that by the year 2040, there won't be any fish left, basically. There'll be just nothing but jellyfish. We're attacking ruthlessly the oceans and the rainforest and the climate and soil and aquifers are all being drained and destroyed to eat animal foods. We talked yesterday a little bit about workers. I mean, the workers who work in animal agriculture, and the dairies and other, I've been to these places. I've been to dairies and to slaughterhouses, slaughter plants, and to stockyards and factory farms. These workers have the highest rates of injuries, basically, among all workers. They have among the highest rates of suicide, drug addiction, alcohol abuse, spousal abuse. They're doing the work that brings out the worst in them. If you have to go to work and stab animals all day or impregnate them on a rape rack all day, I mean, how do you go home to your family? If I take out my wallet, and this is the thing to really have to understand very clearly, is that this is the voting booth. These votes really get counted, these dollars. The other votes, I don't know. I have my doubts. But these votes get counted. So if I'm voting for meat, dairy products, and eggs, that goes into a system, it gets counted, and because of that, because of my demand, somewhere, someone's going to stab an animal, someone's going to impregnate a female against her will on a rape rack, someone's going to steal the baby and kill the baby. That's directly what's happening. That's what I'm causing. The thing we have to understand is, very clearly, that's not where it ends. I vote for it, I cause it, and that's enough right there. But then I turn around and I actually eat it. I eat the violence, the terror, the fear, the despair, the anxiety that these animals are experiencing, and I feed it to my innocent children, so they teach their children to do the same thing. So we have these animals in our hands who yearn, just like we yearn, for the opportunity to live their lives and to celebrate their lives on this beautiful planet, and we crush them. We torture and mutilate and kill and rape them. How can we expect that we are then qualified to have healthy food, a very healthy government, kind and loving and wise leaders? This is a grassroots movement. We have to wake up. We have to realize that we are being enslaved when we enslave animals. We are being exploited when we exploit animals. That our actions to try to liberate people and ourselves are merely ironic if we don't stop eating animal foods. We want for ourselves what we refuse to give to others. I used to teach college courses in comparative religion. Every religion understands that the fundamental, essential essence, really, of all the world's religions, it's beautiful. It agrees. It's basically this teaching. Whatever you most want for yourself, give that to others. That basic teaching. If we want to be loved, then be loving. If we want to live in a clean, healthy environment, then help others live in clean, healthy environments. If we want to be free, then let others be free. Animals, how many of you have a companion animal, or at some point have had a companion animal, a dog or a cat? Yeah, some of you. So you know what I'm talking about. You know that dog or cat, there's a being in there. If you look in her eyes, there's someone in there. And her interests are to her as important to her as my interests are to me. And this is just as true for cows and pigs and chickens and fishes, right? There's a being in there looking out, and their freedom and their ability to live their lives. And so we would be very upset if someone came along and took our cat and put her into a closet and made her live in her own excrement, and they were going to eat her. We wouldn't let that happen. We would do anything we could because we know her. We care about her. What animal agriculture is, it destroys our capacity to care. We don't care. We learn the subtext of every meal is don't care. The cremation of care, essentially, the destruction of care in our society. So what we're talking about when we say vegan or when we say animal liberation, essentially, is just to awaken our caring again, and the caring that's in our heart naturally. So it's really important to understand the interconnectedness of these different types of health, and that animal agriculture is the most destructive thing we're doing to the health of the planet. There's nothing that comes close to animal agriculture, nothing. Animal agriculture reaches its tentacles to the bottoms of every ocean, into everywhere in the heart of the rainforest, into every building in our society, into every cell in our bodies if we're eating these foods. And everything it touches, it's harming and destroying. Animal agriculture is demonic. We have to understand this so clearly. It brings out the worst in us. And if you were all born as cows or pigs or chickens, I would not have to explain this to you. You would understand this very well. Since we're born as a superior dominant species, it's not so obvious. We've all been brainwashed in an incredibly deep level because we're eating this teaching. So to understand environmental health, cultural health, physical health, and the irony is when some people are starving, other people are eating huge amounts of grain processed through animals and getting liver disease, kidney disease, heart disease, strokes, diverticulitis, Alzheimer's disease, breast, prostate, and colon cancer, the dementia. All these diseases have been definitively linked to eating diets high in animal-based foods. I think this is pretty well known. I won't have to go into it here. I mean, this is going to be repeated by many of the other teachers here, but this is well documented. Like I say, here I am 40 years as a vegan, and it's so liberating. I haven't had to go to a doctor. I haven't been to a doctor in 45 years. I haven't been to a drugstore. The basic idea is that when we're living our lives and we're connecting with our purpose and we're connecting with something beyond material reality, connecting with the fundamental truth that what each one of us is a field of infinite and eternal consciousness, that we're here on this earth for a few years functioning through a physical vehicle. And we're not here to dominate and exploit and compete with other beings and use them as instruments. That's animal agriculture programming us through that, so we're enslaved. We have to realize our true nature. The true nature of human beings and of all living beings is infinite and eternal consciousness that is founded on the wellspring of love and joy and freedom and creativity. That's our true nature. I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of our society because this is something that most people don't understand. So the core of our society is Herderism. This is a word I coined. Herderism is a society which we are that's based at its core around herding animals. Most people don't realize this, that we're a herding society, that we're organized around herding animals for food. We don't walk around, most of us, with a stick poking sheep, but it's done on a massive scale. Like I say, if we don't include fish, we're talking about 70 billion animals, the land animals are imprisoned in basically mechanized herding operations for the most part around the world. And then literally, 2/3 of the fish we're eating now are factory farmed, right? So we're herding fish. And I'm telling you, factory farming of land animals is very painful and toxic for these land animals, but factory farming of fish is much worse, if you can imagine. I've been to these places. The fish farms are incredibly disgusting. Where you have these swimming pools filled with water. I remember looking into one, and it was filled with black water. I thought, well, it's just nothing but black water. Then I realized it was packed with fish, and the fish could hardly move. They were so crammed in there, and the workers were dumping in antibiotics and all kinds of chemicals to try to keep the fish alive. Then they're pulling them out, and they're skinning them alive. It's unbelievably toxic. People are eating that stuff thinking they're getting healthy omega-3s. It's nothing but violence and toxicity. And dairy. Think of dairy. Dairy, basically, they're feeding huge amounts of fish to cows. People don't realize this, that cows eat actually as much or more fish than human beings do because it makes them give more milk. And so fish concentrate in their flesh toxins much more concentrated way than any other way. Virtually all of the heavy metals, PCBs, dioxin, nuclear radiation, it all ends up eventually in the ocean. And then these fish concentrate it because they're breathing the water, and they're also very often at the top of long food chains. So the large fish that we eat, like salmon and tuna and so forth, they concentrate enormous amounts of toxins. And then, so we eat the fish, we get all of that directly. It's good. It's great for the cancer industry, right? They're guaranteed to make a lot of money. It's great for the bankers in the background that have made all the loans for all the hospitals and all the medical equipment. They're promoting this. Of course they're promoting it. The media, they're all promoting this. That's how you make your money. They haven't made any money on me in 45 years. I haven't gone, I've boycotted the whole medical industry. But the whole idea is to understand that when we're eating dairy, we're eating all that fish that the cows are eating. So all the heavy metals and pieces, and it concentrates in mammary secretions more than anywhere in the body. So all the cows are eating all kinds of other stuff too. And so the toxins, as well as the naturally occurring toxins in dairy products, there's huge amounts of estrogen. And there's an estrogen that's the same molecularly exactly the same estrogen as in human, that we use the estrogen in human beings. And so we heard yesterday about how, for example, girls start having their first menstruation. In Japan, for example, right after World War II, Japan lost the war. And the United States went in with the dairy industry to really bring them down, even worse. And told all the Japanese people, now you got to eat dairy. And so the dairy industry can make a lot of money. And so the Japanese started eating a lot of dairy products because they were forced to by the American business. And in one generation, the age of the first menstruation of girls went from about 17 to about 12 in one generation. And think what that does to society. When you have girls getting their first menstruation at the age of 12, psychologically, we're not ready to have sex and have kids and all that. It should be, 17 or so, and that's what naturally would be. But dairy products, all the estrogen, destroy, and of course, it's the driving force behind breast cancer in women, prostate cancer, so many other problems for men. And then casein, the main protein in milk, we don't have renin. Like little calves have renin, the enzyme renin, that breaks down casein. So casein causes enormous problems to us. Again, it's filling up the hospitals with type 1 diabetes and all the autoimmune diseases. That's pretty much all caused by casein and our autoimmune system trying to protect from casein. So we have to understand that IGF-1 growth hormone, which is rampant in dairy, because a calf puts on 1,000 pounds in about 9 months. That's like throwing gasoline on a fire. It's again the driving force behind breast, prostate, and many other types of cancer is dairy. So to really understand that we have this system in place that's based on herding animals, it works great for the wealthy elite that gets rich on destroying environments and on controlling resources and on sick people and on wars. But for us, the 99.9% of the people, why are we supporting that? Why don't we wake up and realize that if we enslave animals, that's the template, the mental and emotional and spiritual and cultural template that we will be enslaved the same way the cows are. You go to a hospital, the way women have to give birth to their babies, it's the same as a dairy. That's not, I own you, I own your baby. I'm going to do the drugs on that baby that I want to do. I mean, we will lose complete control of ourselves because of animal agriculture. Because whatever we sow, we will reap. If we're going to sow violence and slavery on a massive scale, how can we expect to be free? And we think we're not going to be obese. We can't figure it out. We're so blind as a society, we don't know the basic teaching of whatever you sow, you're going to reap. That's the basic teaching in all the world wisdom traditions, karma. Whatever you sow, you will reap. All these animals have serious diseases. They all have osteoporosis because we hyper-confine them and abuse them and steal all their milk and steal all their eggs, steal all the calcium out of their bodies, steal all the minerals out of their bodies. Their bodies are breaking, their bones are breaking under them, inside them. Chickens, cows, downer cows, they have severe osteoporosis, and we get an osteoporosis epidemic. Of course. Cancer, they all have cancer. They're eating such toxic food, they're so stressed out, and we get cancer epidemic. We break down their families, and we find our families breaking down. There's no family allowed, in animal agriculture. You always steal the baby from the mother. The most hideous, demonic behavior a human being is capable of, we do it on a massive scale, and then we pretend it has no consequences. How can it have no consequences? The consequences, like Martin Luther King said, we bomb Vietnam and it explodes in our own cities as violence and poverty and destruction. What we sow, we reap. And we are so blinded by the cultural program that we don't see it. Even the Ph.D. intelligent people have no idea. This is the most obvious thing. And yet, we're taught to just ignore systematically this fundamental connection. I cannot be an advocate for GMOs if I'm eating animal foods. The mentality of animal agriculture is the mentality of GMOs. It's a mentality of domination and exploitation of other beings and of ecosystems. So this is what developed thousands of years ago, and then we had slavery, and then the domination of the feminine. We have to understand this very clearly, that the animal agriculture is three things. Number one, you confine them, you imprison them. Number two, you kill them. But the most important thing, you can't have any of it without breeding them. It's breeding them against their will over and over again. That's the essence of animal agriculture. So it's turning the female into a mere breeder. It's reducing the sacred feminine dimension of nurturing life and bringing forth new life. There's nothing, we all know in our bones, if there's one thing we should not mess with and dominate and exploit and harm and torture and kill and destroy, it's mothers nursing their babies and protecting their babies and nurturing their babies. But animal agriculture, that's it. That's the original sin. This is it. When we started owning animals and eating, the apple is not apple in the Garden of Eden, it's meat. When we started imprisoning animals for food, this is the thing, this is the great transgression that we still have not come to terms with. And we will destroy all life on earth until we come to terms with this transgression of imprisoning animals, of impregnating them, sexually abusing them, stealing their babies and killing their babies and doing the same thing over and over again and then killing the mothers. That's the thing. So when men developed animal agriculture, they developed a way of seeing the female as merely a breeder. So women were reduced to being mere breeders, to give me what I want. And So we have to understand, essentially, that women and the domination of women and so forth is a direct result of animal agriculture. And then boys, the final thing, is we have the role model for young boys are also terribly wounded. Now the young boy has to become a hard, tough, disconnected male, capable of violence against women, capable of violence against animals and rival herders. So the natural empathy and sensitivity of boys is shut down. And there's nothing more devastating on planet Earth than hard, tough, disconnected males. We won't survive with that kind of energy and force happening. But animal agriculture requires that. It can't function without it. So this is the system that essentially animal agriculture is and evolved. And this system emerged in the Eastern Mediterranean region. It spread to the Northern Mediterranean region. It spread from there into Central Asia and into Europe, and spread from Europe into North and South America, Africa. It's still spreading today through ConAgra and Cargill and Monsanto and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Dow and Burger King and the IMF and the World Bank. And I call it the whole thing, the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media, banking complex, right? We have this complex, and it's based on animal agriculture. It's based on the mentality of animal agriculture, of a few wealthy elite dominating and exploiting nature, animals, and men and women in order to concentrate wealth and power in the hands of an elite. And until we wake up and understand what's happening and how important our food is, the greatest gift anyone can give the world is to move to a plant-based way of eating for ethical reasons. Thank you. That's the greatest gift we can give to the world, the greatest gift we can give to our loved ones, to future generations, to hungry people, to slaughterhouse workers, to wildlife. That's the gift, and it's a gift we give to ourselves. It's escaping the prison. I mentioned the attitude of, with every meal we're eating, is the attitude of disconnectedness. I want to just mention like 2 or 3 more other ones that I think kind of complete this whole thing, even though there's even a lot more I would like to say. But one is we're eating, with every meal, if we're eating animal foods, we're eating a mentality of privilege and elitism. It's very important to understand that the subtext of every meal, if we're eating animal foods, is certain beings are inherently inferior. Other beings are inherently superior. And it's totally fine for the superior beings to dominate and exploit and abuse and oppress, however they want, the inferior beings. That's the basic message. Unspoken message if we're eating animal foods. And so, again, how can we ever expect to create any kind of effective movement for equality or justice or freedom if we're eating animal foods? It's absurd. It really is absurd. We're wanting for ourselves what we refuse to give. Our blindness is shouting so strongly, but we don't hear it, we don't see it because we're wounded. It's not our fault. We have to understand our basic intelligence has been shut down so much by this that we just don't see it. So I'm here just to remind us, basically, that we have to have integrity. We need to live, we're called to live our lives according to what we would like to accomplish in the world. And all beings who are vulnerable to my choices, I have to, I'm called to think about that, to be aware of that as best I can. So that's one. Another one is commodification. Essentially, every meal is teaching us at a deep level that certain beings are not beings. Certain beings are commodities. I mean, just think about that for a minute. Certain beings are not beings, they're commodities. We buy and sell them by the pound, by their weight. We do that. We call ourselves intelligent. We buy and sell beings by the pound. Can you imagine a superior species coming here and thinking we taste good and saying, well, we're going to buy and sell you guys by the pound now? And I'd say, no, you can't do that to me because, I can play the piano. I mean, so you can't sell me by the pound. I mean, I have all this beautiful feelings and creativity come flowing through me. They say, I don't care about that. We're going to eat you. We don't care about any of that. You're just a piece of meat to us. We would think these are incredibly stupid, blind, idiotic, superior species. Right? That's us. Just off the charts, stupid. We can't see that these are beings. You look into their eyes, it's so obvious. There's someone in there. That they have feelings, they have personalities, they're unique. I'd go to any animal sanctuary and rub a pig's belly or hang out with some chickens or turkeys. They're all unique beings. And they have their own relations, and they have their yearnings. So the whole thing to understand is that we're all harmed by this. And what this does is it creates materialism and reductionism. We have, as I talk about in the World Peace Diet, we have materialist science, reductionist science, materialist religion, reductionist religion. Our two primary modes of knowing, these institutions, I should say, institutions of science, the institution of religion, institution of education also, they're just perversions of true knowledge. We reduce everything to matter, and we think if we can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And so our knowledge, our technology that comes from science, what is it doing? It's destroying us. GMOs, 5G, massive nuclear bombs. This is what we have our smartest people working on. They get the most money. If they can make the most destructive things, the things that imprison us so we can never escape. Monitoring systems, so we're all become little cows in the big pasture that they're controlling. Technology will do that. These animals, they have no chance. Our technology is so powerful, they have no chance. Well, that's our science. That's materialist science with materialist religion that reduces religion in the same way to a dogmatic, enigmatic male deity looking down and judging us and so forth. This is all a projection of animal agriculture. Education that just dumbs down children so that they will be cogs in a machine. That's animal agriculture education. We do plant agriculture the way we do animal agriculture. We have to understand this very clearly. There's two kinds of agriculture, right? There's plant agriculture and animal agriculture. If someone says they're a farmer, you have to say, what kind? Plant or animal? Going back, plant agriculture was always women's work primarily because it's working with the forces of nature and the beautiful abundance of nature. You plant one seed and you get trees that give us thousands of fruits and seeds. The apple tree doesn't charge us by the apple, right? They just come. It's this abundance. And so there's always been these feasts of gratitude for the earth and the abundance of the earth. And we're working with the cycles of nature, of the moon and the seasons. We're working with the natural abundance of life. We plant a seed, and the vegetables and the fruits and the berries and so forth, they grow, and we can eat them. This is a cause for enormous joy, and we can eat whatever we want. We can grow it that way. We can eat it. So we're working in harmony with nature, essentially, and a sense of abundance and joy. But animal agriculture, from the very beginning, was always men's work. Women were not really doing that at all, and it was always the opposite, the exact opposite. The animals wanted to be free. They did not want to have their babies stolen and their lives stolen and their milk stolen and their eggs stolen and their purposes stolen. If we steal their purposes, we lose our own purpose. We have to understand that. We don't have our purpose. But animal agriculture is based on stealing the purposes and lives of other living beings on a massive scale, and who are resisting and don't want to have it happen, so it's violent. We just use violence. And so now, since we live in a society, we're born into a society based on animal agriculture, we do plant agriculture the way we do animal agriculture. We use GMOs. We use pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, monocropping, cutting down everything and growing just a few things, killing everything else. That's all animal agriculture. So again, in order to get to the roots of the GMO problem, all these other problems, we have to move to a plant-based way of eating. We have to go, I'll say the word, go vegan. I love the word vegan because it's actually a word that means something, but the problem with the word vegan is that it's a category, right? I'm a vegan, you're not a vegan. And the whole problem with animal agriculture is it creates these categories of separation. That's a cow, a pig, chicken, that's a food animal. So in many ways, what we're talking about really is healing ourselves from categories and a mentality of radical inclusion that includes all living beings in the sphere of our kindness and compassion. And so I think to just understand that moving to a plant-based way of eating or moving to a vegan way of living is a word for basically just coming home to our true nature. It's nothing to be proud of. It's just simply looking with eyes that when we see beings rather than seeing objects to be used. And that is liberating for us and for everyone. And then the final, I know I'm just about out of time here, the final attitude that animal agriculture really requires is the domination of the sacred feminine. I mentioned earlier, I talk about in the World Peace Diet as Sophia, And Sophia is the ancient Greek word that means wisdom. So this is the wisdom that lives in all of us, whether we're men or women. We have this inner wisdom that yearns to love and nurture and protect life. And that inner wisdom is sacred and precious, and yet animal agriculture is based at its core on repressing Sophia, repressing that natural wisdom within us as human beings so that we can eat the flesh and secretions of horribly abused animals, so that we can steal the babies and kill the babies and so forth. So it's based on destroying family structures, destroying the mother and child bond. Animal agriculture is based on destroying Sophia, that natural wisdom in us. So not only does it cause tremendous suffering to the female animals and to the babies, as we rape and kill them, but it hurts us too. It shuts down Sophia in us. So what we're talking about with veganism essentially is the resurrection of Sophia, the resurrection of the sacred feminine dimension of life that yearns to love and nurture and protect life. And that lives in all of us, whether we're men or women, to live our lives as best we can as expressions of infinite and eternal consciousness. So I'm just going to close with that idea that each one of us is a manifestation of the love that is the source of all life on this beautiful planet. Each one of us is a field of eternal consciousness. I really recommend, if you have a practice of meditation, to quiet your mind every day and just learn to listen within and realize that beyond the clouds of our conditioning of being raised and the wounds of being raised in a herding culture, there's an infinite sky of consciousness that is liberated and free and is of the nature of compassion and kindness and joy and creativity and liberation. And we can tap into that at every moment, and we can create a movement that's maturing so that we see all beings as other human beings as wounded, so we can be the healers to bring this message in a loving and kind way and help create societies and communities of sanity and freedom and liberation and transform our society. And I have to say, traveling all over the world like I've been doing for the last 25 years or so with the World Peace Diet, is that the momentum is really building very quickly, and there is a very positive transformation happening, and we're part of that. So we can wake up every morning and just give thanks, knowing that we have another day to contribute to the healing of our world, to learn more, to care more, to contribute, to make connections, and to help make this movement grow and prosper for the really short time we're on this planet. We're just here for a few short decades. So to come here to this planet that's being so wounded and mugged, really, by animal agriculture, and bring an alternative based on sanity and healing, I think is the greatest gift we can give to the world. So I want to thank all of you, because I know if you're here, whether you're here physically or by live stream, you're part of this awakening, you're part of the healing, you're part of the pioneering effort that's being made to really awaken out of the delusion of violence that is animal agriculture. And when we put our energy into this together and cooperate, we are transforming our planet, and no effort is ever lost. So thank you all very much. Please go forth and multiply the message as best you can. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Much love. Much love to all of you. It all helps. Everything helps. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I wish I had more time. Thank you.